Chapter 11. The next day, Daisy and Waylon's photos for the Young Faces brand became popular on the internet and flooded Facebook instantly. The two Rugrats were even ranked third in the hot search because of their natural looks. #endless happiness. These photos are truly amazing. #Turkulous Thanksgiving. OMG, their looks, they must have gotten God's personal blessing. I'm so jealous. #you summer you. I want to take a look at what their parents look like. #angel without wings. These are obviously children's clothing. But these two kids have given them an indescribable sense of luxury. Is it because of their looks? The comment section below all the posts was on fire. Almost all of them were talking about the two Rugrats' looks. Nolan was sitting in the Black Gold administrative office when he happened to run into the trending search result. Not only did the two children in the photos not show any stage fright, but they also coordinated with each other perfectly, as if they were born for the stage. Nolan could not understand the reason he could not help but notice them. Quincy knocked on the door and walked into the office at this time. "Sir, the sales of the brand Young Faces have risen rapidly all of a sudden. It seems that choosing these two children as our models was the right thing to do." Nolan nodded but did not look away from the screen. Quincy thought of something and then added, "One more thing, Royal Crown Entertainment Co. called today. They seem to plan to hire the two kids." Royal Crown Entertainment Co. was the largest entertainment agency in Bassburg, and it was also the only company that ventured into showbiz under the Black Gold Group. Many of the big names in the entertainment industry originated from the Royal Crown. All the artists who they could choose had exceptional potential, and their future stardom was boundless. Nolan's eyes drooped slightly. Ask for their parents' consent first. After all, they're still too young. We're not in the position to make the decision for them. Quincy was stunned for a split moment, but their documentation doesn't include their parents' contact information. This was when Nolan looked up. The parents' contact information wasn't included. They've filled in a phone number. "I'm not sure if it's the genuine one." Quincy looked through the documents in his hand and quickly found the anonymous number left by the two children. At Seaview Villa, Maisie put on her shoes and reminded the three Rugrats before going out, "Sweethearts, Mommy is heading to work now. You guys stay at home obediently and call your godmother if something pops up." The three Rugrats waved their little hands. "Goodbye, Mommy." Maisie smiled and blew them a kiss and then went out. The phone on the side rang as soon as Maisie left the house. The three Rugrats walked to the phone and stared at the unknown caller's identity. Only one possibility came to mind because that was the number that they had written on their documentation for the Black Gold Group. Daisy pressed the accept button, tiptoed, and answered with a childish voice. "Hello, this is the House of Her Royal Highness." "Who are you?" "I am." Nolan paused for a second and softened his tone. "I'm the Mr. that carried you the other day." "Mr. Handsome, it's you. Are your parents at home?" "Mommy has gone to work." "What's wrong, Mr. Handsome?" Daisy asked, casually while supporting her head with both her hands. A curve spread across Nolan's lips. "Where are you? I'll come over and pick you up." Quincy could not believe his eyes when he saw Nolan smiling. Let alone when Nolan threw his status and nobility out the window by offering to pick up the kids. Nolan ended the call, picked up his car key, and got up after Daisy disclosed her address. "Sir, how about I fetch them on your behalf? How can I allow Mr. Goldman to go in person?" Nolan threw the key to him. "You'll drive." Quincy was rendered speechless. Quincy drove to Seaview Villa 9, stopped the car outside of the villa, and saw the children walk out happily. Quincy felt a sense of wryness deep down. From my point of view, doesn't this look like Mr. Goldman is about to kidnap someone else's children at first glance? Daisy got into the car with Colton. She then scooched over and sat beside Nolan. She had two braided ponytails and wore a sunflower tutu, which made her look very adorable. Colton wore a brother-and-sister outfit that resembled Daisy's in a lot of ways. He planned to impersonate Waylon and accompany his sister out to meet this man. "Mister, where are you taking us?" Colton asked curiously. Nolan paused for a bit and glanced at Colton. He had a slight hunch that the boy felt a little different from yesterday. "Have you had lunch?" "We haven't." "Do you plan to buy us lunch?" Colton blinked. Nolan saw a mole in the corner of Colton's eye that he might not have noticed yesterday. He reached out and rubbed Colton's head. "You were rather hostile towards me the other day." Colton scratched his cheeks, stuck his tongue out, and smiled. That was because I thought you're a bad guy. My brother can be exceptionally fierce when he thinks of you as a bad guy, Daisy explained on Colton's behalf. The corners of Nolan's lips were slightly raised as he said to Quincy, "Go to the Grand Courtyard Hotel." At the Grand Courtyard Hotel's executive restaurant, the entire restaurant was only serving them because Nolan had reserved the whole restaurant for themselves. Nolan looked at the two Rugrats and smiled faintly. "Feel free to order whatever you want to eat." The two kids picked up the menu and glanced at it. All the dishes in this menu were outrageously expensive, but Daisy pointed to the most expensive one. "Waylon, I want to eat this." Then we'll order that, and this, we'll take that too, this, and this." Colton was a little disgusted. "Are you a pig?" Daisy turned her head away with a snort. "Waylon would definitely let me do whatever I want." Nolan took a sip from the water glass. These kids were gradually growing on him for no reason the more he looked at them. The restaurant manager stood next to the children while they were ordering food. He then said embarrassedly when he saw that the children had ordered Australian lobsters, "I'm so sorry, sweethearts. But we've run out of Australian lobsters today. We're not the only hotel that has run out of stock, so are the other restaurants in the vicinity." Daisy looked a little disappointed. She loved to eat lobster the most, just like her mother. Nolan looked up. "How long would it take to send a lobster here from a coastal city by air?" Quincy was stupefied. "Did I just mishear that? Mr. Goldman is planning to spend money on airmail just to make it possible for the kids to have a taste of Australian lobster. Although the resemblance is truly incredible, is he taking them in as his biological children?" The restaurant manager smiled. "Mr. Goldman, it'll take 2 hours to send the lobsters here from a coastal city by air, then arrange for it to be sent here by air." "Okay." The restaurant manager nodded and left with the menu and order. Daisy and Colton looked at Nolan in unison. "Mister, you're so rich." Quincy was rendered speechless. "Isn't it obvious? He's burning his money like it's nothing." Nolan smiled faintly. "Have you ever thought of making a debut in showbiz, mister? Is there an entertainment agency that wants to take us in?" Daisy asked while tilting her head. "Yeah, of course, but I won't force you to do so if you don't want to. After all, they're still very young. It's only natural for us to not force them into it if their parents disagree with the idea." He was indeed a little curious when he mentioned their parents. "I'm up for it," Daisy replied. "We'll be able to make some money for mommy, so why not?" Nolan was startled but returned to his original expression very soon. "Will your parents be willing to let you do so too? We don't have a father. All we have is Her Royal Highness. It's really difficult for Her Royal Highness to make money to raise us, so we'll make her life easier if we can share her burden by making some money." "They don't have a father." Nolan's eyes dimmed. "What's your mommy's profession?" Nolan asked again. Colton supported his chin with his hands and smiled. "Our mommy is amazing. She's a designer." Chapter 12, A Designer? Nolan's expression turned slightly solemn, and he could not help but stare at Colton. "What's her name?" "Our mommy isn't very well known, so you won't even know who she is even if we were to disclose her name to you. By the way, mister, do you have a girlfriend?" Colton changed the subject swiftly. Nolan squinted. "A girlfriend? There's a woman living with me, but I've never admitted that she's my girlfriend." Colton smiled. "How about we introduce our mommy to you? Although our mommy isn't very well known, she's very awesome. Not to mention that our mommy looks gorgeous. Just look at us. You should be able to imagine just how beautiful our mommy is." Nolan pressed his lips together tightly and did not utter a single word. These two children do look exceptionally outstanding. So the woman who gave birth to them should probably not look too bad, but for some reason, it's almost impossible for me to believe that they really have nothing to do with me whenever I look at them. But Willow didn't get pregnant or give birth to any children before this. Moreover, this little girl's face seems familiar the more I look at her. Colton's smartwatch vibrated, so he lowered his head and took a glance. It was a call from Waylon. He gave an excuse and got up. "Mister, I need to go to the bathroom." Colton ran to the bathroom entrance, pressed the answer button, and placed the watch by his ear. Waylon was in the hospital at the moment and had gotten his hands on the DNA results. "Colton, the result is already out. Is he our daddy?" "Yes, he's our daddy." Colton nodded and frowned after listening to Waylon's reply. No wonder he resembles us so much, and since he's our daddy, why is he with that vicious woman? Waylon walked out of the hospital's entrance with the DNA results and said, "Didn't Godmother tell us about the origin? Mommy got kicked out of the Vanderbilt Manor because of the scheme that the bad woman laid down for her 6 years ago. Daddy doesn't know about our existence, he doesn't even know about Mommy. It must be because of that bad woman." Colton's face turned gloomy. Humph. That bad woman wants to keep our daddy to herself, in her wildest dreams. Just you wait and see how we abduct our daddy. Colton was suddenly knocked to the ground when he was about to turn around. A woman's voice sounded all of a sudden. Where did this little bastard come from? Don't you have eyes? Layla patted the clothes on her body. They were all from a designer brand, very expensive, and she was reluctant to wear them at home. She would only wear them when she was out here having meals with friends. How could she feel delighted now that a brat had scrapped them? However, after her gaze fell on the little bastard's face, Layla's face distorted due to the shock. This brat. Why does he look so much like Mr. Goldman? Colton got up from the ground and patted his clothes. You're the one who doesn't have eyes, Auntie. Who? Who's your mother? Layla had an ominous premonition. Deep down, a boy who looks like Mr. Goldman has appeared out of nowhere suddenly. Is it possible that he's a bastard that a random woman conceived with Mr. Goldman? But that doesn't sound right. Mr. Goldman hasn't been very fond of women, except that night from 6 years ago. Thinking of 6 years ago, Layla could no longer calm herself down anymore. Hadn't that bitch only slept with Mr. Goldman for that one time? How could it be possible to get pregnant in just one night? I've run into a child who looks so much like Mr. Goldman here when Maisie has also returned to Zlokova recently. What makes you think you're worthy of knowing who my mother is? Colton ignored her and wanted to leave. Layla grabbed his arm abruptly. You little bastard, didn't your mother teach you how to talk to your elders respectfully? Colton turned his head and glanced at her with his cold gaze. Didn't your mother teach you to love children? The look in his eyes resembled those of Mr. Goldman's when he was ferocious. Is your mother Maisie Vanderbilt? Is that bitch your mother? When Layla addressed his mother as a bitch, Colton bit her hand instantly. Ah. Layla, who got bitten, was so furious that she pushed him away. Colton fell to the ground and burst into tears abruptly. Boo-hoo-hoo. Someone is hitting a child here. Boo-hoo-hoo. Colton's cries caught the attention of several waiters. The waiters saw a child sitting on the ground and crying miserably, then saw the woman's domineering look. They hurriedly stepped forward to help the child up. Madam, how could you push a child? Isn't this none of your business? Did you see me push him? The truth is that he fell down by himself, Colton exclaimed while sobbing. I've only run into you. But you pushed me and called my mommy a bitch. Boo-hoo-hoo. The waiters began to sympathize with the child. The restaurant manager rushed to bring the news to Nolan. After all, this kid came here to eat with Mr. Goldman. After Nolan heard the manager's explanation, he got up and left with the restaurant manager. At the same time, Daisy and Quincy also caught up to them. Waylon. Daisy saw Colton sitting on the ground, crying. Thus, she hurried over and glared at Layla. Why did you push my brother? Did you see me push him with your own eyes? You bastards, you're trying to put all the blame on me today, aren't you, bastards? Don't know who I am. I'll show you how I deal with brats like you too. The rage within Layla burned even brighter every time she thought that these kids were most likely Maisie's children. She raised her arm and was about to swing it at them. Daisy deliberately stepped forward to fend it off. Her small body fell to the ground after taking the slap head-on, and the waiters surrounding the scene were infuriated when they saw this. Daisy did not cry, but a reddened mark appeared on her fair and tender cheek. You ran into it yourself. Layla was caught off guard as the girl had rushed out before her hand could even reach her. However, the next second, Layla's face paled in an instant when she saw Nolan. Mr. Goldman. After seeing the mark on Daisy's cheek, Nolan's expression turned gloomy, and the temperature of the air surrounding him slid downhill at the exact same moment. Mrs. Vanderbilt, why did you make such a harsh move on a child? No, Mr. Goldman, this kid was the person who ran into me first. Not only did he not apologize after that, but he also talked back to me. He even bit me. You can take a look at this. Layla stretched out her hand that had just gotten bitten. The bite mark was still very visible. Colton sobbed. You're the one who scolded me first. You even called my mommy a bitch. That's why I bit you. Huge tears gushed down from his eyes, and the crying sounded so heartbreaking that the waiters felt extremely distressed. Even if this child ran into you, it's mostly by accident. Why would you argue over such a trivial issue with a child? Yeah, you're also a mother yourself. Don't you feel sorry for this kid, after such a huge blow? I'm afraid that this incident might overshadow the kid's childhood. Nolan walked to Daisy and Colton. He first turned to Daisy, who was too stubborn to cry, and rubbed her cheek, which had become red and swollen. He then wiped away Colton's tears. The emotions of these two children had actually affected his mood. Nolan got up and gave Layla an irrefutable glare. Apologized to the kids. Mr. Goldman. Just what's your relationship with these two kids? Nolan's thin lips were pressed against each other tightly. The two children have nothing to do with me, but you don't have to worry about my relationship with them. You only need to apologize to the child because you're Willow's mother. And I promise I won't make your life difficult because of this matter ever again. Chapter 13. Seeing that Nolan was really annoyed, Layla knew that it would not do her anything good if she were to provoke Nolan at that moment. She gnashed her teeth and bowed her head to the two children. I'm sorry, kids, it's Auntie's fault, so please forgive me. Damn. I can't take things lightly before I get to the bottom of this matter. They definitely can't stay here if they're really that bitch's children. Nolan looked at Daisy after Layla left. Daisy suddenly raised her face and grabbed Colton's hand. Sorry, mister, we don't want to eat anymore. We want to go home. Nolan was flustered, but thinking back to what happened just now, he knew that the children were probably frightened too. Okay, I'll send you back. Never mind, we'll go back by ourselves. Daisy took Colton's hand and left quickly. Quincy looked dumbfounded. Mr. Goldman, these kids do have quite a temper. Huh. Nolan did not respond to him, but looked at the two small figures from behind. He was not sure what to think about at this moment. Colton's tears had already dried out when the two came out of the hotel. He even smiled while bragging to Daisy. How was it? Aren't my acting skills top-notch? However, Daisy could not laugh. Colton looked at the redness and swelling on her cheeks and said angrily, damn it, that old witch actually had the guts to hit you. I'll never let her go when I meet her again. Colton, that Auntie is Willow's mother. Is it true that Daddy won't want to recognize us? Daisy's eyes were bloodshot, and she had not felt any pain when she got beaten. However, she could not get by the fact that her father had only demanded Layla to apologize, not pressing the matter further. It was obvious that he did not care because she was that woman's mother. She felt that their father surely did not want them anymore, and she was a little disappointed with him. Colton rubbed her cheek. Don't worry, that won't be the case. That vicious woman has only blinded Daddy. Let's wait a little longer. We'll be able to reveal who our daddy is when the time is right. We can't acknowledge him so easily now. Daddy will surely fight with Mommy for our custody if the person that he truly loves is Willow. He's so powerful in Zolkova, and Mommy will definitely lose if he wants to pursue the matter through a lawsuit. We have to wait for a while longer. He's not the daddy that we want if he keeps on protecting Willow. We can protect Mommy anyway. And we can afford to support Mommy through all this too. Daisy nodded. Yeah. At Vena Jewelry, Layla had been oppressed when she met Nolan, and the more she thought about it, the more she could not let it slide. Thus, she had rushed to Vena Jewelry to look for Maisie. Maisie, you bitch, come out here. Maisie could already confirm whose voice it was before Layla entered the office. She was sitting at her desk, going through the information on the acquisition of the rough diamonds, and did not even bother to lift her eyelids. Miss Scott, can you quit bitching around with the world, bitch? This is really not a flattering quality. Layla walked up to her and glared at her fiercely. You're really quite a schemer, huh? You actually returned to Zlokova with two bastards after 6 years later. Bastards? Maisie closed the documents immediately and looked up at Layla indifferently. What do you mean by that? What do I mean? Layla scoffed. I met two children in a restaurant today. Now give it to me straight. Are the two children yours? What children? I don't understand what you're talking about. Maisie placed the folders down. She saw them in a restaurant? Could it be that Riley brought them to a restaurant for dinner? No, I don't plan to let the Vanderbilts know that I brought my babies back, as I don't want to be threatened with my babies. Do you really not know about this? Layla looked at her suspiciously. Why do you think that they're my children? I don't even know them myself, but you're blabbering here as if you've seen them in person before this. Layla wondered, is it true that those two children really don't belong to this bitch, Miss Scott? You've come over here and questioned me as if this is an interrogation just because you saw two children. Why are you so worried that the children are mine? However, no matter whether the children are mine, what does it have to do with you? Seeing that Layla did not speak for a split second, Maisie laughed. You made it sound like I've given birth to your children. Instead of bothering yourself with issues related to me, I would advise you to care more about your daughter, you. Layla was so angry that she was speechless. What about me? It's been years since my father let your daughter take over Vena Jewelry, and I found a batch of adulterated rough diamonds now. So do you think my father would still give your daughter the management of the company if he were to know about this? Layla's expression changed slightly. What adulterated rough diamonds? Don't you give me such crap. Fuck man, 6 years have passed, and this bitch still has such a glib tongue. But this is normal. You now live in a wealthy family, and all you care about now are only what to eat, what to drink, and where you can have fun. So why would you care about the company? Maisie leaned back slightly. If you don't have the brain for the game, then learn from your daughter and build up your knowledge base. Don't just learn how to dress yourself up like a tasteless nouveau riche. Layla blushed after being humiliated. But she smiled triumphantly as soon as she thought of something. You were only born with a silver spoon in the Vanderbilts since you were a kid, but if your father hadn't married Marina Gonzalez, I would have long been the missus of the Vanderbilts. Then why didn't my father marry you sooner? Maisie's chuckle sounded so exasperating. Layla clenched her hands, gritted her teeth, and said, because as a man, he'd choose a woman who could assist him in his career first. Frankly speaking, your mother was really a pitiful woman, even though she was the official wife. Didn't your father cheat on her in the end? Seeing how cold Maisie's eyes were, Layla continued proudly, some people are destined to be bestowed with a good life, but it's a pity that they run out of luck rather quickly too. You and your mother are classic examples of such people. Would your father marry your mother if she wasn't a designer at the beginning? And would he cheat on her with me after 3 years of marriage? Men don't like capable women and will choose the weaker side. I know your father's preferences and know how to please him. While your mother only knew how to remind him to prioritize his career, all men will get tired of such a woman very easily. Listening to Layla's pride and complacency in her action and her explanations regarding her observations, Maisie burst into laughter. You're right. A person will become invincible when they achieve a certain extent of shamelessness. If my mother could be as thick-skinned as you were, how could you have the chance to get yourself involved in her marriage? Layla was so furious that she could not utter a single word. Maisie waved her hand impatiently. Miss Scott, if there's nothing else that you wish to bring to my attention, please forgive me for the lack of hospitality. After all, your daughter has messed up the whole Vena Jewelry. And I think the company is truly tenacious enough to still be in business up to now. Layla folded her arms with a disdainful expression. Don't act so arrogantly just because you're the world-renowned jewelry designer. Zora, you're nothing when compared to Mr. Goldman. Let me put it out there first, you'd better not have any thoughts about Mr. Goldman. Willie is Mr. Goldman's true girlfriend, and you're in no place to compete with her. Layla said so, turned around, and walked out of the office. The smile at the corners of Maisie's lips gradually disappeared. I'm not interested in Willow's boyfriend, but when it comes to Vena Jewelry, it's something that I won't let go of no matter what happens. Chapter 14. Layla may be angry with Maisie, but she had accumulated all the wrath within her. Thus, she went to Stephen and complained about Maisie as soon as she got home. Stephen put down the newspaper, obviously a little surprised. Z has returned to Zlokova? Yeah, she's now Zora. A world-renowned jewelry designer. I heard Willie say that she's so bold that she doesn't even care to flatter Mr. Goldman, let alone Willie and I. Since Stephen knew that his daughter Willow was in a relationship with Mr. Goldman, he had high hopes for her and valued her a lot, hence. It was only natural that he could not just sit back and watch from the side when he learned that Maisie was talking back to Mr. Goldman. After all, not only did Stephen want the reputation and status, but he also did not want to offend the Goldmans. How could he bear to sit on the bench through this whole incident and witness as his perfect son-in-law was being taken away from him? Stephen folded the newspaper and put it down. This girl, I haven't seen her in 6 years, and she's managed to provoke Mr. Goldman. Layla sat beside him and held his arm, pretending to be aggrieved. Yeah, right, I went to the company today to remind her about that out of kindness, but she scolded me. Dear, Z has always listened to your advice the most. We can't let her keep on acting so foolishly. We won't know when Willie will be embroiled in Mr. Goldman's wrath for her. It'd be difficult to handle when that time comes. Stephen's expression dimmed slightly as he suggested solemnly, I will get that girl to come back home tomorrow. Layla was complacent deep down when she heard this. I might not be able to talk back at you, bitch, but I refuse to believe that even your father cannot do anything about that foul mouth of yours. When they were eating dinner, Maisie saw that Daisy's cheek was a little puffy and then creased her brows. Daisy, what's wrong with your cheek? Mummy, we went to lunch with Godmother today, and we ran into Willow's mother. That bad woman questioned us if we were your kids all of a sudden, and she even hit Daisy. Maisie's expression turned gloomy instantly, and she almost bent her metal spoon. If it weren't for fear of scaring her triplets, she would have gone out with a knife now. Damn you, Layla. That's why she came to my office to look for me earlier today. But wait a minute, how would Layla know that I have children, and how is she so sure that they are my children? Daisy raised her hand and placed it on the back of her mother's hand. Don't be angry, Mommy, it doesn't hurt much. The reason I'm sad is that the children of other families are protected by their daddy, but I'm not. Maisie's heart skipped a beat, and her eyes dimmed. Although she could give her kids an incredible growth environment, they still lacked a father's love. She felt very sorry for the kids because she did not know how to tell them about their father. After all, even she herself did not know anything about the man. Waylon raised his head and asked earnestly, Mommy, why did Daddy abandon us? Colton followed the flow and nodded, yes, why doesn't Daddy want us anymore? Maisie was about to say something when Daisy cried out loud next to her, boo-hoo-hoo, Daddy must have found himself another woman. That's why he doesn't want to be with Mommy and us, boo-hoo-hoo. Colton and Waylon looked at each other. Daisy's acting skills are truly impeccable. Don't cry, Daisy, there's no such thing, your daddy didn't abandon you. Maisie had run out of ideas. She gently wiped the tears for her as she comforted her. Daisy stopped crying and stared at her mother with her bloodshot eyes. Really? Maisie bit the bullet and said with a grin, yes, why would your daddy abandon you? Then why have you never told us anything about Daddy? Why did Daddy abandon us? Daisy was planning to continue her questioning barrage in order to get to the bottom of the matter. Seeing that the three Rugrats' gazes were fixed on her, Maisie covered her mouth and became sad. Let's not continue with this topic anymore. I won't mention your daddy to the three of you because your daddy died very young. I can imagine that weeds have fully covered his grave at this very moment. The three Rugrats were rendered speechless. Mommy, won't that hurt your conscience? Riley's call was connected while Maisie was thinking about ways to put off the three little Rugrats, but she was safe now thanks to the phone call. She got up and went to the balcony to answer the call. I'm eating, what's the matter? However, there was a strange man's voice on the phone. Are you a relative of Ms. Hill? We're from the traffic police department. Maisie rushed to the precinct and saw Riley sitting in a chair pitifully. She took a deep breath and stepped forward. Sis, what have you done? I accidentally ran into someone else's car. And it belongs to someone that I can't afford to offend. She might have provoked a tiger with this accident. She would be skinned when she got back to her house if her father were to know about this incident. Maisie looked at her. Whose car did you hit? Riley looked inside cautiously while a traffic policeman walked out of the office with two men politely. That man was none other than Nolan Goldman, a man that had been lingering around inexorably. Maisie's facial expression stiffened all of a sudden. She looked at Riley and gnashed her teeth. You're really good at picking your victim, but why didn't you kill him in the accident? Riley's eyebrows creased, and she claimed innocently, I really didn't mean it, I was in a hurry, who knows? She had been petrified when she ran into the Rolls-Royce, and she felt as if she had been struck by lightning when she saw the people in the car. Nolan's eyes dimmed slightly when he saw Maisie, especially the image that would not stop appearing in his mind when Willow approached him last night. He walked toward them as his faint gaze fell onto her. The guarantor that she gave us is you. Maisie smiled slightly. Yes, this is my friend's fault. Let's just follow the procedure. Mr. Goldman, just name the amount of compensation that you want. Nolan's expression did not change at all. The compensation is unnecessary. After all, the car is going to be written off already. Written off? Maisie looked at Riley. Is it that serious? Riley shook her head. No, there was a dent. Quincy, who was standing at the side, explained with a smirk. Miss Vanderbilt. Each and every car that Mr. Goldman owns is always new and is never repaired or refurbished. Mr. Goldman's cars will be written off even if it's only missing a screw. So are you saying that you want my friend to buy you a brand new car? Maisie's expression turned gloomy in an instant. Quincy sounded as if it was the right and proper thing to ask for. It depends on the attitude that you emit at this very moment. Maisie was about to lose it while Riley jerked the hem of her clothes hurriedly. There was no way that she could afford to pay for a new car. Maisie knew that this man was not short of money, so it was only natural that he would not ask Riley to compensate him with a brand new car. He was only doing so just to retaliate against herself. Judging from Miss Vanderbilt's attitude, are you not satisfied with the offer? Nolan stared closely at her. He originally planned to hand this matter over to the traffic police and did not have the intention to make this woman pay for the whole car. It was just that he thought of what Willow had said to him last night and felt a little impetuous when he found out that the guarantor that she had summoned here was actually Maisie. No one has ever affected my emotions to such an extent, not even a woman, however. I've made an exception and lost my cool because of the two kids, and I'm being affected by this woman right now. Plus, did this woman really do something like that to Willow 6 years ago? Then I would like to see what she would do for her so-called friend today. Chapter 15. Maisie took a deep breath to calm herself down and smiled. I'm not sure what's the attitude that Mr. Goldman wants to see from us. If it's an apology, then I'll apologize to you on her behalf. All he wants is an apology, isn't it? Maisie harnessed all the positive attitude that she had in her and bowed to him. I'm sorry, Mr. Goldman. Seeing that she had lowered her posture, Nolan felt a little ironic. I didn't expect Miss Vanderbilt to apologize on behalf of her friend. I really can't tell that you're someone who would do something to hurt your sister. Maisie straightened her body suspiciously. What does Mr. Goldman mean by that? I hurt my sister. Is he talking about Willow? Nolan approached her, leaned closer to her face, and said with an unconcerned tone, I thought you're someone who would bear the consequences of all her doings, but now it seems that you're nothing more than that, he said while turning around indifferently. I'll let today's incident slide this once. Riley's heart, which had been on the brink of beating its way out of her chest through her throat, finally calmed down upon seeing them leave, but as soon as she thought of the words that Nolan said to Maisie just now, she asked, Z, what does Mr. Goldman mean by that? How would I know? Maisie smiled. I guess it's because he thinks that I'm currently targeting Willow deliberately, so he has to speak up for her as her man. Am I right? What? Willow Vanderbilt is Mr. Goldman's lover. Riley was shocked. Is Mr. Goldman blind? There are so many women in the world. And he took a fancy to a woman like Willow. Maisie turned her head and glanced at her. You're still thinking about gossip? I would suggest you start coming up with an explanation for your father when you get home. She walked away right after she finished speaking. Riley pouted and caught up to her footsteps immediately. The next day, Maisie took out a list of the raw materials that needed to be purchased and handed it to the purchasing department staff. Just order the rough diamonds according to my purchasing slip. You'll be responsible for any mistake that emerges this time around. The clerk in the purchasing department took a look at the list on the slip and nodded. All right. The purchasing department staff was sorting out the list of required acquisitions when Maisie was about to leave. And that was when the office phone rang. She put the list on the table, got up, walked up to the phone, and answered the call. Another female clerk got up, walked to her desk, and took a picture of the original or manufacturer's address and contact information, which were stated on the purchasing slip, with her mobile phone. After returning to her seat quickly, she sent the photo to Willow secretly. Willow, who was sitting in her office, could not help but lift the corners of her lips when she saw the photo that the clerk from the purchasing department sent to her. Since you're in charge of the purchasing department, then don't blame me for this. the office's landline rang. Willow picked up the phone and answered, "Hello? Willie, I called your cell phone several times, but why has it been turned off?" Layla could not get to her over her cell phone, so she could only call the landline of her office instead. Willow's face turned pale when she heard this. "My phone was smashed into pieces by that bitch. So it's nothing unusual if you couldn't reach me through it. I'll buy myself a new cell phone tomorrow. Why are you looking for me? Your father will call that bitch to come home tonight. You should also bring Mr. Goldman back for a meal with you tonight." "Your father won't let that bitch succeed as long as you go official with Mr. Goldman." Willow could not help but frown. "Mother, since when did you see Nolan go back for dinner with me? And what if he doesn't want to go?" "In the past 6 years. Nolan had never said that he wanted to go to the Vanderbilts Manor for a meal. All you need to do is to coax him to come over. No matter what you need to do to achieve that, don't forget, your father has high hopes for you now. How can your father and I help you if you can't even do this?" She had to hurry up and get her daughter to secure her position as the official Mrs. Goldman. She had been feeling extremely disturbed ever since she saw the 2 children at the restaurant the other day. Layla's words made sense. "Father has been taking me more seriously in recent years because of my relationship with Nolan. Now that Maisie has come back, and in addition to her return, she's still a top-notch international jewelry designer, I would be nothing in front of Maisie without Nolan's support." Maisie sat in her office and went through the information of all the company's previous staff. Her eyes were fixed on Mr. Kennedy Fannin. She remembered Mr. Fannin as he was originally her mother's assistant. He had been managing Venna Jewelry and had maintained Venna's sales in Bassburg after her mother's death. Venna's sales had started declining ever since his resignation. Her phone vibrated all of a sudden. Maisie took a glance at the caller's identity that appeared on the screen. It was her father that she had not contacted in years. She could not help but hesitate for a moment. Everything felt a little new and strange to her when she came back to the Vanderbilts Manor once again. After stepping into the villa, the nanny was the first person to have recognized her. "Milady?" Layla was wearing a one-piece evening dress, sitting on the sofa and drinking tea. She put down the teacup and got up as soon as she saw Maisie's arrival. "Oh, Z, you're finally back?" Glancing at Layla, Maisie could not help but think of the slap that Daisy took on her cheek, and her expression dimmed instantly. "You still owe me a slap. You'll have to return it sooner or later." Layla grinned and walked forward. "Your father knows that you've returned to Zlokova. That's why he called you to come back here for a meal. What's with the look? It's not good to let your father see you in this mood." The corners of Maisie's lips raised coldly. "Why do I have a feeling that this meal is going to be my last supper? I've never contacted my father ever since I returned to my home country. He must have gotten the information from either Willow or Layla. He's never contacted me throughout the 6 years too, but he specially asked me to come home for dinner today. The main thing that gave me the chill was that he didn't even start the invitation with a greeting. How can you call our family dinner your last supper? Please don't nauseate me. I'm more used to hearing you yell me a bitch. That somehow feels a lot kinder." Maisie emphasized the word kinder as if she was trying to provoke her deliberately. Before Layla had the chance to lose her head, a deep voice had already come from upstairs. "Z, it's been 6 years, but you're still so relentless. Is that how you speak to your mother?" Maisie chuckled. "My mother is dead, if I'm not mistaken. You were there too when she was cremated. What have you learned throughout the 6 years abroad? Is this how you talk to your elders now?" Stephen almost kicked the bucket from all the accumulated fury. He originally felt a little guilty about driving her out of the house back then, but he did not expect that she still had not repented. Layla walked to Stephen and persuaded him. "Dear, don't be angry with Z. I'm just her stepmother. After all, I can understand the reason Z hasn't accepted me after so many years. In my opinion, you're worse than a stepmother, Maisie Vanderbilt." Stephen reprimanded her angrily. "I asked you to come back for dinner instead of a family feud today. If you're so discontent, then get out." Maisie stared at her ferocious father. "He was as heartless as today when he drove me out of this manor 6 years ago. He'll choose to believe in whatever Layla and Willow tell him, but on the contrary, I'm just the unreasonable brat who's constantly creating stirs and disrespecting the elders." Maisie scoffed. "I really don't plan to stay for another second longer." She turned around and was about to leave the manor. And that was when Willow walked in the door with her arms wrapping around Nolan's arm. When Layla and Steven saw Nolan, they all went up to him to greet him. The fury on Steven's face dissipated completely as if he was not the same person as seconds ago. Mr. Goldman. I didn't expect you to come, yeah. Nolan only nodded symbolically while his gaze was fixed on Maisie all of a sudden, and his tone sounded rather indifferent. The Vanderbilt's manner is really boisterous today. Steven took a glimpse at Maisie and introduced her awkwardly. This is my younger daughter, Maisie Vanderbilt. Oh, I just learned that the famous jewelry designer Zora is the daughter of the Vanderbilts. Steven smiled implicitly. Yeah, she inherited the talent from her mother. Maisie stood with her arms crossed, watching the others like an outsider. She could not help but laugh at all the flattery that assaulted Nolan. I shall take my leave now. Please, do enjoy your dinner. Willow stopped her as soon as she was about to leave. Z, now that you've finally come back, let's have a meal together. Layla played along with the script and responded with a motherly appearance. Yes, Z, don't go against your father during such an occasion. Chapter 16. Maisie did not say a word. They poured all their thoughts to get me home for dinner. They even invited Nolan here and are now insisting on wanting me to stay for dinner. Then I must stay here to see what this mother and daughter pain plan to do. She then raised her head and chuckled. Okay, then I'll stay here for dinner. Willow and Layla did not expect she would agree, but everything was going according to their plan. Maisie only bowed her head and ate without talking during the entire meal. Steven and Layla were almost silent throughout the dinner, probably because of Nolan's presence. Nolan did not eat much. He had wanted to refuse Willow's invitation when she asked him to accompany her back to the Vanderbilt manor, but Maisie was mentioned. Since Willow had said that Maisie was the one who invited him to the Vanderbilt manor, he would have to see what Maisie had up her sleeves. Z, how have you been all these years? That was probably the only time when Steven would think of showing care for this daughter. Maisie did not even raise her eyelids. I did have a great time, thanks to you. A hint of embarrassment stagnated on Steven's face for a moment. Layla hinted to Willow with her gaze. Only then did Willow begin to express herself in front of her father. She fetched some food into Nolan's bowl. Nolan, you should have more. Layla smiled immediately and added, Mr. Goldman, thank you for taking care of Willie throughout all these years. Willie has always been a thoughtful and well-behaved child, but please show her some patience if she were to give off any shortcomings. Maisie lowered her head and almost burst into laughter. Nolan noticed something, raised his eyes, and looked at Maisie. Miss Vanderbilt seems to have something to say about this. This sentence directed the attention of the other three people on the dining table onto Maisie. Maisie could not help but respond, what can I say? But I'm only a little curious, Mr. Goldman, you're in your 30s, and the both of you have been together for 6 years. It should be about time for you to marry our thoughtful and well-behaved girl. She emphasized the phrases thoughtful and well-behaved earnestly as she had seen through the Vanderbilt's underlying plan. With this sentence, let alone Layla, even Willow's expression turned a little rigid, not to mention Nolan, who was glaring at Maisie as if he was going to skin her alive. Willow was afraid that Nolan would overthink, so she added immediately, Nolan, Z is just joking around, don't take it to your heart. However, Maisie did not care about the consequences and continued asking, Willow, how should I put it into words? Mr. Goldman is your boyfriend, but why do you sound so polite when you're talking to your boyfriend? Willow's expression changed slightly, and she glared at Maisie furiously, seeing that Steven's expression was not looking too happy. Layla smoothed things over immediately. Z, look at you. What are you talking about? This isn't a blind date. Damn it, this bitch could have brought up anything, yet she chose to talk about their marriage. Is she doing so deliberately to embarrass us? Although we've asked Willow to bring Nolan back so that we could make a match out of them, it's impossible for us to talk about it so blatantly, and there's no way that we can force the whole marriage matter onto him. We're doing so in front of Maisie just to make her know her place and give up fighting for Nolan, so all we need to do is just deliver the message implicitly. But who could have thought that she would eradicate the whole play? Maisie was not a fool. The mother and daughter pair had both come to her and warned her not to have any thoughts about Nolan, and they had now invited Nolan to the manor and insisted on keeping her here for dinner. Their intention was so obvious to begin with. That being the case, She must match them up even more diligently. Maisie ignored Layla and continued to stare at Nolan. Mr. Goldman, please don't tell me that you've never planned to do so. Maisie pretended to be surprised upon seeing that his expression turned gloomy. How is this the right thing to do? A woman's prime shouldn't be wasted, not to mention Willow is already 26 years old, she's no longer young. It's time for her to get married. Willow's expression turned more and more embarrassed, but she did not dare to look at Nolan. Maisie raised her eyebrows. Or, Mr. Goldman. Are you playing with my sister's feelings, Maisie Vanderbilt? Stephen smacked the table flusteredly and exasperatedly. He could no longer consider Nolan's presence. Shit your trap. How can you comment on Mr. Goldman? Maisie chuckled playfully. You're getting all worked up just because I told the truth, Father. Even Mr. Goldman isn't furious about this, so how can the magnanimity of someone like you be smaller than Mr. Goldman's? If Nolan wanted to get back at her at this moment, that would only prove that he was an unforgiving man. You. Stephen was so ferocious that all the veins on his face and neck became extremely visible. This wicked daughter. I would have never let her come back if I knew that Nolan would be here with Willow today. Maisie put down her silverware and got up. It seems that there's no way that I'm welcome to stay for this meal anymore. I was just helping you guys to tell the truth out of kindness, but you guys just went into reverse all of a sudden. As expected, I'm still an outsider in the Vanderbilt matter. I'm leaving already. Please do enjoy your meal. Stephen was trembling with wrath. While it was only natural that Layla and Willow's expressions did not look much better compared to Stephen's, Willow glanced at Nolan cautiously. Nolan stood up with a cold face, and Willow, who sensed his anger, did not dare to utter a single word anymore. Seeing Nolan leave the dining area without looking back, she sank her teeth into her lip. Stephen had naturally lost his appetite as Nolan had left the scene unhappily. He threw his silverware on the table, got up, and went upstairs. Both the mother and daughter pair hated Maisie to death. Maisie walked to the side of the road and was about to grab a cab, but a hand pulled her back abruptly. Maisie stumbled for a split second, found her balance, and glared at Nolan. Mr. Goldman, what do you mean by this? Nolan gnashed his teeth. Did you do that on purpose? Chapter 17. Mr. Goldman, why would you think that I did it on purpose? All I did was try to match you up with Willow, didn't I? She explained while struggling, trying to break her hand free. Nolan hauled her forcibly, and Maisie almost fell into his arms. He gave off a cold voice. You're the one who asked Willow to invite me to the Vanderbilt matter, and that's your scheme all this while. Maisie was startled and let off a trace of doubt. She then raised her head, met his gaze, and felt a little amused. So I'm the one who asked Willow to invite you to the Vanderbilt matter? Isn't my reputation great? Nolan's eyes looked stern and cold. Maisie Vanderbilt, you're not in the position to stick your hand into the matter between Willow and me. I don't care what your purpose is. Don't act like you're a Weisenheimer. Nolan, I'll tell you something today. I didn't ask Willow to invite you over here, although I don't know what Willow says to you. These things have nothing to do with me. Maisie shook off his hand and said solemnly, I couldn't care less about the matter between the two of you, so go back and tell your girlfriend not to point all her fucking fingers at me whenever she needs a scapegoat for some random blame. I'm not a pushover that she should choose to provoke so easily. Maisie was so angry that she no longer cared about her image and choice of words. She turned around and was about to leave, but Nolan suddenly dragged her into his car. Mr. Goldman, what are you doing? Let me go. Maisie pushed the locked rear door and glared at Nolan, who was getting into the car. Nolan Goldman, you'd better let me go, or I'll call the police. Do as you like. Nolan ignored her and drove the car away. Watching the car leave, Willow, who had just walked out of the matter, clenched her fists as her eyes dimmed. Nolan drove the car into the wilderness and stopped the car. Maisie glared at him vigilantly while he did so. What are you doing? We're in the middle of nowhere. Are you telling me that you're planning to kill me here? Get off. Nolan only uttered 2 words. Maisie took a glance at the pure darkness outside the car and asked, You're asking me to get off here? Nolan seemed impatient. Are you telling me that you don't understand what I just said? Get out of the car. Maisie hesitated, pushed the door, and got out of the car directly. Nolan drove away right after she closed the door. Looking at the car lights fading away, Maisie gritted her teeth. Mr. Goldman, you do have the fucking balls. It was pitch black all around, and the end of the endless highway was nowhere to be seen. There was the sound of insects chirping coming from the forest. She illuminated her surroundings with the cell phone's flashlight and walked to the opposite side of the road. There were only rocks and seawater under the slope found on the other side of the curbstone. Maisie wanted to call herself a cab, but there was no cell signal in this place. It won't be so miserable that I'll have to spend the night here, right? Nolan drove the car for a long time and then pulled over by the side of the road. He did not know what was wrong with him. But he had truly lost his head and started to argue with her. This is indeed annoying. I really thought that Maisie had asked Willow to invite me to the Vanderbilt Manor just to talk me into the idea of marrying Willow. I've never publicly admitted that Willow is my girlfriend. Even Stephen and Willow's mother have never had the guts to ask me to marry Willow in front of me, and I indeed don't have the plan of marrying Willow, even though Willow is the woman that slept with me 6 years ago. But Maisie said that she didn't ask Willow to invite me to the Vanderbilt Manor. Then why would Willow tell me that it was Maisie? Is Maisie lying? Or did Willow lie to me? Nolan's brows were creased, and he was agitated deep down again. That woman has been left in that place. She should be scared and overwhelmed now, shouldn't she? He tooted, turned the car around, and drove back. When he got back to the place where he left her, Nolan saw Maisie sitting on the curbstone, facing the beach. Her graceful silhouette was sitting upright, and her long, thick, curly hair spread behind her. She then inserted her fingertips into the hair, bound them with a hairband, and the slender neck exposed under her hair made her look like an elegant swan. The night sky enveloped her body as if it was a mysterious gauze, which gave anybody the urge of wanting to tear the gauze apart. Maisie turned his head and was startled by the man standing behind her. She said with a sneer, "I thought Mr. Goldman was really planning to leave me here overnight. I didn't expect you to be quite conscientious." Nolan frowned as he watched Maisie get up and pass by his side. He somewhat suspected whether he was being fascinated by a supernatural figure. He was even more reluctant to admit that he could think about something so steamy just by looking at a woman tying her hair. Maisie walked to the car's rear and was about to open the door when his voice sounded from behind, "Sit in the front." Maisie turned and glanced at him. His tone sounded indifferent. "I'm not your driver." He got into the car after saying so. Maisie tooted, turned around, walked to the front passenger seat, got into the car, and sat down. "Mr. Goldman, I think you're quite a baffling man." Nolan ignored her and drove away with a gloomy face. Maisie did not bother to speak to him either. She supported her head with one hand and leaned on the window of the car. When the car left the wilderness, Maisie's cell phone rang. She took a glance at her cell phone. It was Waylon's call. "Oh my God, it's 9:30 p.m. already. They must be anxious that I haven't gone back home at such a time." She answered the phone call, and her tone turned gentle immediately. "Hello, sweetheart?" Nolan's expression dimmed. "Sweetheart? Does she have a boyfriend?" "I'm sorry, something came up, and there was a delay. I'm going back now, so wait for me at home. Mwack, see you." Maisie then ended the call. The man beside her scoffed. "Boyfriend?" Maisie took a glimpse at him with a bright smile. "Yes, it's my man. There's not only one man waiting for me at home, but two men." Nolan did not say anything, but he felt even more irritable deep down. He drove her out of the car directly when they arrived downtown. Thanks to his inexplicable attitude, all Maisie got from the trip was nothing more than a bewildered look on her face. It was already 10 p.m. When she got home, Waylon placed her slippers away and frowned. "Mommy, were you with a despicable man just now?" Maisie burst into laughter. "How do you know that?" Waylon crossed his tiny arms in front of his chest and explained helplessly. "You'll call us dears or sweethearts through the phone whenever you have a nasty man by your side. Mommy is a pro when it comes to dealing with such situations. While we were living abroad, she'd send messages to Colton or me and ask us to pretend to be her boyfriend or husband whenever those men that she had no feelings for called her." Maisie knelt and rubbed his little cheek. "My smart boy, you always remember all these down to the very details. Where are Colton and Daisy?" "They've fallen asleep." She patted Waylon's little head. "Thank you. You always take care of your younger siblings when Mommy isn't home." Waylon spread his hands. "I'm the eldest, ain't I?" At Vena Jewelry, Maisie walked to the elevator and was about to enter. But Willow caught up to her and dragged her aside. "Willow Vanderbilt, are you looking for a fight?" Maisie retracted her hand and smirked at her. "Maisie Vanderbilt, I didn't expect you to have such a scheme up your sleeve." "Huh? What do I have up my sleeve?" Maisie chuckled. Willow gnashed her teeth and glared at her as if she was about to tear her into pieces. "Didn't I warn you not to have any filthy ideas about Nolan? What did the both of you do behind my back last night?" She had seen Maisie get into Nolan's car with her own eyes. And Nolan had not come back all night last night. This bitch must have seduced Nolan. Chapter 18. Maisie looked at her with her arms crossed. "Why don't you direct that question of yours to your boyfriend? Why are you asking me that? This sounds absolutely absurd. She makes it sound like I've snatched her man from her." Willow's face turned pale due to the rage. "Maisie Vanderbilt, you won't be preening yourself for long, just you wait." She flung her arm and left after leaving such a threat behind. Maisie squinted her eyes as she gazed at Willow leaving the scene. Who will be the triumphant one in the end? That's still unknown. At Maisie's office, Maisie was sitting in front of the computer surfing the internet, and suddenly a staff member walked in a hurry. "Ms. Zora, something has happened." Maisie raised her head calmly upon seeing that she was so nervous. "What's the matter?" "A few customers bought our jewelry in the store and found that they were all fakes. They've tracked the origin of the jewelry to our company and are now in our office building. The employees of the purchasing department said that the raw materials were acquired according to your order." After she finished explaining, Maisie lowered her eyes, turned off her computer, and got up. "Let's go and take a look." In the lobby, the few guests, who had come to the office angrily due to the fake jewelry, had created a stir. "Vena Jewelry has been in the business for decades. And yet you're manufacturing fakes. Do you still want to be in business? This pearl bracelet costs a few $1,000s. I went to other stores to inspect them and found out that they're fake pearls. Are you trying to con your customers just because of your reputation now?" A lady threw the bracelet on the table agitatedly. "We'll see if your jewelry business can survive when I expose this matter to the public." Willow and her secretary walked out of the crowd. She walked up to her and comforted her with a smile. "Madam, calm down. We've already communicated with our purchasing department. There must be some misunderstanding regarding this matter." "Misunderstanding?" The lady pointed to the bracelet's box. "Take a look at that. It's clearly bought in your store, and I still have the receipt from your store. The evidence is conclusive." Willow was very calm. "Madam, our products have never been found out to be fraudulent. There must be some issues with the supplier's materials. Don't worry. I'll ask our designer about the source of our materials when she's here. If it's found out to be fake, I'll double the compensation." Maisie's voice sounded, and everyone's gaze fell on her, who arrived at the scene slightly late. Maisie walked to the counter, picked up the pearl bracelet, and took a glance at it. "These are indeed fake pearls. See? I told you it's fake." The lady became even more confident. Willow looked at her. "Z, you ordered all these materials, and the purchasing department also purchased the materials according to the order slip that you placed, but why are there fakes?" After Willow finished speaking, the secretary behind her took out the order that she had gotten from the purchasing department and handed it to Maisie. Maisie skimmed through the slip and smiled. "This is indeed the order slip that I handed them." "Z, did you do this to ruin Vena's reputation? You're deceiving our customers." The lady glared at Maisie. "You're the one who purchased these fakes. You're so wicked. Why open up stores? Pay me back the money that I've lost." "Yes, pay her back. If you don't give us an explanation today, we'll bring this matter to court." Saying that Vena Jewelry is selling fake jewelry to deceive customers, Willow was secretly preening herself. "Maisie, we'll see how you get to stay in Vena. What's wrong this time around?" Nolan and Quincy appeared in the crowd. Willow walked up to him aggrievedly as soon as she saw Nolan. "Nolan, we found fakes in Vena again, but Z is responsible for the acquisition of the rough diamonds and raw materials this time." Seeing Nolan, the lady stepped forward hurriedly and complained. "Mr. Goldman, you might not know this, but I bought fake pearls from Vena for thousands of dollars, so please reason this out for me. This is a huge jewelry company, a brand that has existed for decades, so how can it sell fake jewelry to deceive customers?" Nolan's gaze was fixed on Maisie. He walked toward her and said in a cold tone, "You're responsible for the purchase of raw materials. Give them an explanation." Chapter 19. Maisie took a glance at Willow, put down the pearl necklace in her hand, and the corners of her lips were slightly raised. I didn't order this batch of mock-ups, so I won't take this fall. Willow came over and grabbed Maisie's hand. Z, you should tell the truth, after all. Vena is still your father's company, you mustn't destroy your father's efforts, right? I'm telling the truth. Maisie kept a straight face while pulling her hand away, took the pearl bracelet, and walked to the lady. Madam, you bought fake jewelry from Vena. And I know you're not in the mood, after all, you paid for it with your money, and that means something, but don't worry, I can't allow Vena's reputation to be dragged through the mud because of some fakes. I promise that not only will your money be refunded, but you can also bring a genuine product back after I've gotten to the bottom of this incident. The lady was stunned. It was only natural for her to accept this arrangement willingly, as she would be able to get her money and beloved jewelry back. That's fine by me, but tell me now. What's the matter with this counterfeit? We only want to get a statement from you today. Maisie walked to the staff of the purchasing department. I did tell you that you'll be held responsible if something wrong were to happen to this batch of material when I handed over the purchase order to you, right? The clerk of the purchasing department was dumbfounded and lowered her head. But the materials are indeed ordered according to your order slip. Yes, Z, the purchasing department just ordered according to the order that you handed to them. So how can you blame them for when something has gone wrong? Otherwise, should I blame you? Maisie raised her gaze. Willow choked, and her expression obviously changed. Nolan frowned and stared at her with his indifferent gaze. He knew deep down that Vena was a company that Maisie's mother had founded, and it should be impossible for her to fool around with the company's reputation. Maisie showed the raw material order slip in front of everybody. Anyone who knows a thing or two about jewelry knows about the company Jade Mountain Company, the supplier that I wrote on the order slip. All the rough stones of the fine diamonds and jade used by half of Basburga's jewelry companies come from Jade Mountain Company. Several guests nodded and discussed. The ores from Jade Mountain Co. are indeed top-notch. The gemstones and diamonds that they produce are worth tens of millions. Yeah, the raw stones of Jade Mountain Co. can't be fake. Maisie picked up the pearl bracelet. The pearls on this bracelet are made of pearl powder and crystal. As we all know, crystal is worth very little in the market. Its price is not as high as gold, silver, and diamond. And its quality can be categorized into high and low. Premium and natural crystals are only worth approximately $400 to $600 per ounce, while the price of top-quality crystals is approximately a little over $200 per ounce. The lady did some math with her fingers and asked all of a sudden. Then, is the crystal in my pearl bracelet worth the money? It's of course worthless, they're just ordinary crystals. Maisie smiled and looked back at the employee of the purchasing department. You've been working in a jewelry company for so many years. And you don't even know the gemstones of Jade Mountain Company? The staff from the purchasing department looked down, and her expression became embarrassed. Willow was really scared deep down. She could not let Maisie have any room to get back up. They did buy it from Jade Mountain Company. But now that counterfeits are found, it only shows that the rough diamonds and raw materials of Jade Mountain Co. might not all be real. Willow was proud of herself deep down upon seeing that everyone was staring at her silently. However, she soon noticed that everyone's gaze did not look right. And Willow's face turned slightly pale. Could I have said something wrong? Maisie chuckled. Director Vanderbilt, you're working in the jewelry industry, but how come you didn't inquire about the company Jade Mountain Co. back when you took over Vena Jewelry? Don't go around telling others that the raw materials of Jade Mountain Co. are fake when you have meager knowledge about them. You're not only offending the owner of Jade Mountain Co., but also making a joke out of yourself. Willow's face almost turned crimson. Someone even burst into laughter secretly after Maisie said so. The cause of this fake pearls incident definitely did not originate from the supplies. If it is, then we should visit Jade Mountain Co. and question them. But if this batch of material did not come from Jade Mountain Company, it means that someone is trying to tear the company apart. If that's the case, I won't just stand here and take the fall for them. After saying so, Maisie's gaze seemed to drop on and off Willow. I worked in the jewelry design industry while I was in Staslo. I've gotten my hands on gold, silver, diamonds, gems, carnelian, and jade. Do you doubt my ability to distinguish the genuine from the fakes? As she said so, She glared at the employees from the purchasing department. It's time to replace the whole purchasing department, although it was a casual statement. It turned the face of every single employee from the purchasing department pale. Willow looked nervous but bit the bullet and said, "Z, although the people in the purchasing department have caused this issue, you can't just fire them. After all of them acted according to the instructions." "Then are you saying that there's a problem with my order?" Maisie sneered. "The public has just seen it. The order did say Jade Mountain Company, so how did it go wrong when the order arrived at the purchasing department?" "I had warned them at the time that the purchasing department would be held responsible for the mistake. However, as the company director, the employees under your management have made such a big mistake and sold fake products to the customers. If you can be held responsible for the incident, then I won't care about it." Willow bit her lip at a loss and could only look at Nolan. Nolan was indeed a little disappointed with how Willow handled the matter today, but he understood that she did not understand, hence, he did not argue with her. "Then dismiss the person in charge of the purchasing department. After all, it's an error of the department." Maisie could not help but feel ridiculed when she heard this. Doesn't she need to be held responsible as the company's director? Willow's heart skipped a beat. "What does this bitch mean?" Nolan's eyes looked cold. "Willow's knowledge in the jewelry industry isn't as good as yours. She herself probably doesn't know anything about such mistakes, so how do you want her to be held responsible?" Chapter 20. Maisie had nothing else to say after listening to that, so she waved her hand. "Okay, you're a shareholder, and you have the final say here." She turned around and walked to the customers with a smile. "Ladies and gentlemen, please come with me to the VIP room and negotiate about the details." The customers nodded and followed Maisie to the VIP room. Willow was delighted deep down when she listened to how Nolan protected her. "I knew that. I'm still Nolan's bias, Nolan. I didn't know that such an incident would happen. I'll pay more attention in the future." Willow gave off a sincere and apologetic attitude while admitting her mistakes. Nolan took a glimpse at her and said with a cold tone, "You don't understand the market. So just don't walk right into such a situation in the future. Just let Maisie deal with it." Nolan walked away with Quincy. Willow lowered her eyes as her nails sank into the palm of her hand. Maisie, Maisie, Maisie. Not only have I not chased her away through this incident, but I also have to leave everything to her. I'm the official director of Vena. In the VIP room, Maisie asked the employees to bring in the authentic versions of the products that the customers had bought and placed them on the table. As an apology, these will be given to you as gifts. As for the payments, they've been refunded through respective platforms and will be credited soon. I'm truly sorry for what happened today. She got up and bowed to apologize to them. The lady smiled and waved her hand. "It's okay, we've got the general picture of the whole incident now. Plus you've also given us an explanation, so let's just wipe this incident off the book. Thank you for your understanding, madam." Maisie sent the customers to the door personally, and the customers left with great satisfaction. Maisie then walked out of the elevator in a good mood, looked up, and saw Nolan standing in front of the French windows in the corridor. Her ecstatic mood dissipated immediately. "Mr. Goldman, you do know you're on my floor, right? This isn't the floor where Willow's office is located. I was waiting for you." Nolan slowly turned around. Looking at her coldly, Maisie forced a smile off the corners of her lips and stepped forward. "What's the matter, Mr. Goldman? Are you here to vent for your little girlfriend again? Can you stop talking like that all the time?" Nolan did not like this tone and attitude. "Sorry. That's just who I am." Maisie shrugged. Nolan's thin lips were pressed into an indifferent line. "That's not the attitude that she gives off when she's dealing with others. She's hostile when she's around me." Are you feeling upset because I helped Willow?" Maisie looked blank. "What?" Nolan seemed to have seen through her. "I know that your relationship with Willow has always been bad. You're making her your target because she took over your mother's company." He approached her and took his time to speak. "You have to be forgiving whenever there's a chance to do so. She hasn't even complained about what you did to her 6 years ago." "What did I do to her 6 years ago?" Maisie met his eyes and smirked all of a sudden. "So Willow has become a victim to you?" Nolan lowered his eyes and brows and said nothing. Maisie suppressed her smile, and her face became indifferent. "Yes, she has always been the pitiful one in front of others. Even my father feels distressed whenever he sees her victimizing herself, let alone you." Maisie Vanderb, Mr. Goldman, Maisie interrupted him expressionlessly. You don't even know a thing about what I've experienced, so you don't have the right to judge me. I don't care what the enchanting Willow has told you, but I'm saying this with a clear conscience. I was the victim of the incident from 6 years ago. She then returned to her office almost immediately after saying so without waiting for Nolan to say anything.